Welcome to E2 Effective Elders. And today in our podcast, we explore how to share our faith, evangelism, good news for people who are looking for hope.
Hey everyone, welcome to the E2 Effective Elders podcast. Visit us at e2elders.org and please share this good word with others.
Hey everybody, welcome to Connect Elder to Elder Conversations here at the E2 Effective Elders podcast. And as always, we say thanks to CDF Capital for making this podcast possible. CDF has been a longtime partner of E2 Effective Elders as they invest in leaders across the country and around the world. And today, I want to give a very special welcome to somebody who's pretty close to me, and that would be Aaron Johnson. Aaron is a chaplain working in a police environment. And Aaron, welcome to E2.
Hey, thanks, Dr. Johnson. Good to see you.
It's good to see you. For those who are unaware, Aaron happens to be my son, and he is serving as a police chaplain in New Orleans. As a matter of fact, he's with the St. Bernard Parish Sheriff's Department. Aaron, tell us a little bit about your role as a police chaplain.
There was a pretty evident need some years ago of somebody to help out, listen to, and encourage deputies in their job. And I was at the time sort of an associate minister at the church that we had planted here after Katrina. And it was a chance to serve, I thought, to get more involved. And I became an actual post-certified deputy in the process, so working for them full-time, but also serving as the chaplain. So it's kind of been a process, but we can get more into that later.
Yeah, all right, awesome. And, one of the reasons why I wanted to interview Aaron is because when we look at the 6 challenges facing elders, ELDERS, that first E is for evangelism. And if there's anything that the local church needs to be doing right now is turning up the heat on the burner of intentional sharing of hope with people. We call that evangelism. And Aaron's got a pretty incredible story as to how their church, called The Gathering, has been instrumental in closing the gap between believers, followers of Jesus, and those who someday we hope will become followers of Jesus. So, Aaron, why don't you turn the hands back on the clock to around Katrina, around 2005, and tell us some of the story. And as you go along, I'm going to be asking some questions so that we connect the dots with evangelism and elder leadership.
After Katrina, 2005 closed and we got into 2006, and a handful of people kind of formed a team. My wife and I at the time were a part of Team Expansion Ministries. They're, church planters around the whole globe, and they helped form the team in New Orleans to deal with the aftermath of Katrina. It started out asking the number one question any church has to ask is, what is the needs in the community, and who's our audience? And so serving locally, whether it was gutting houses or literally starting at the end of one street with lawnmowers and just walking, every house just needed the grass cut just to get rid of some of the blight. It was pretty obvious and hands-on practical work in the beginning. By 2008, we had started meeting on Sunday nights in our pastor's living room, and it was small. It was 10, 12 people at the beginning, and we kind of grew from there. But ever since the beginning, just asking the question, what are the practical needs that we can do and ways that we can serve the community?
Mm-hmm. And it sounds like the word compassion would be very descriptive of your ministry approach, your theology, and all of these needs and the compassion of Jesus just moving you into the community.
Yeah. The first official thing besides, starting the church meetings or small group there on those evenings was getting counseling going. And we knew that we could listen to people and we could talk and we could pray and we can be a shoulder to lean on. But there were a few layers to unpack. So a counselor moved here from Ohio and started a practice and was licensed and got things going, rented a storefront, tiny little office so that he could begin seeing clients one-on-one. And that was in 2008, before we ever had a church building. And we started working at the same time on a big bowling alley to clean out, gut it, and rebuild it. And that took almost 2 full years. And one of the things when that building opened was we bought a bunch of used inflatables, think backyard birthday party inflatables, moved them into this big room, big building, and we would buy 5 or 6 pizzas and put some 2 liters out there, and someone could have a family birthday party for their child. And I mentioned those 2 examples because think post-Katrina, the devastation was almost indescribable. The loss, both physical life and possessions, was devastating. And people needed real, legitimate, but also Christian counseling, but they also needed joy. And we all know a good get-together, a good party, a good birthday party for a child is pretty innocent, but it can also just bring joy for a family to celebrate. And there just wasn't much to celebrate back then. So that got going, I want to say in 2010 and 11, that was kind of off to the races. And literally every Saturday and Sunday, the building was booked for those types of parties for families to come together and celebrate.
Yeah. So again, very much like First Chronicles chapter 12, verse 32, the sons of Issachar had minds to understand the times, and they knew what Israel should do. So your leadership team had a mind to read the culture right here and decide what it was that needed to be done by the people of the gathering to minister to so many people who were in need. You know, when you make mention of a counselor coming from Ohio, if I remember right, that gentleman's first name is Ron, correct?
Mm-hmm.
And Ron was one of your first elders at the gathering.
He was, and that was tough to get started back then. We had a few outside churches that helped us, like a lot of church plants do. And so we had a representative from 2 or 3 of those congregations that served as our first elders. And a local gentleman was leading another nonprofit ministry, and his family began attending our church. And so that was the group. There was about 6 of them that first got things going with the gathering.
Mm-hmm. So the bounce house or the inflatables, do you still have those at the gathering?
Yeah, a few of them had to be replaced. But it has been an opportunity to hire young people from the community, from the general community, don't have any involvement with the church. And we asked them to watch the little kids while the party, make sure they don't bump their head, make sure they, don't spill their Coke and pizza and stuff like that. But it's interesting. It's wonderful to watch young people have their first job, but it's in a loving and caring environment. So not only are you caring for people that basically is your customer, but you're also caring for your team and training them up. And that's loving and discipling them in a way, evangelism, because they have no other dealings with our church besides they're an employee for just over a few hours on the week. And that led into a local wealthy businessman came and asked, could I put a automated ice machine out in your parking lot? I've got in the other parts of the town, could I put one up in this edge? And I don't know if you mentioned, we're right on the edge of the lower 9th Ward in Araby. And we debated it. We weren't sure if it was a good idea. And he said, I'll tell you what, I'll rent the parking space that it takes up, but I'll also pay your water bill. And there were times as church leaders, we kind of looked at each other and we said, how are we going to run a 24,000 square foot building? How are we going to operate this thing? How are we going to fund it? And when a guy came and was willing to pay our water bill and invest in us as not only as people, but also as a beacon, that parking lot, that church building in the area, I knew that cattle on 1,000 hills was the verse that came to my mind. I had no idea where he would provide, how he would provide, but I knew we were okay somehow, some way.
So you have people from the community coming to your campus, whether it's for counseling, because their lives are broken and they're getting Christian counseling. You have people coming using the inflatables. I happen to know that you have people coming to use part of your facility for a funeral dinner, things of that nature.
Yep.
You've got people coming to get ice because of that giant ice machine out in your parking lot. It's kind of like I remember at the Creek, we would have blood drives. We would be a voting precinct area. We wanted people to come to our campus so that eventually, after coming in the side door, so to speak, they would want to be a part of us. I know that the gathering, again, closing the gap with people in the community. Tell us a little bit about both your Coffeehouse as well as the Christian Daycare.
They started about 6 years ago. And both of them, we saw the need, I guess, or the opportunity. And we had a young couple in our church, actually, and that provided the leadership for the staff. And then we built out the daycare for about 40 students. And there are over 70 on a waiting list right now. People in the community knew going rates. They knew what good daycare cost. And to be honest, not one child besides the director's child attends the church. And while I thought that was a problem, I valued it because it didn't feel like some sort of exclusive club. It felt like we are caring for the people, any customer's most prized possession, their child. So that's gone well. The reputation is there, and we've done they have done a great job with that. The Coffeehouse was the end of the bowling alley used to have a bar room, so it wasn't a part of the first structure. And we're on a busy street, and we're on some people on their way to the city to go to work, and so the opportunity, the location. So a few people from the church put a little side LLC together so that everything was separate and above par. And they started a coffee house, and it is well known, and it is jam packed every day.
And again, it's being salt and light to a community needing hope. Let's segue now. The Gathering has done such a great job of making sure that compassion is driving your ministry, and you want to connect with people who are not yet a part of the church. Now, let's segue a little bit. For 8 years, you were on a journey. You became a volunteer in the sheriff's department as a reserve deputy many years ago. Tell us a little bit about that journey to where you are now a deputy. You've graduated from the police academy. You carry a Glock and you wear Chaplain on your uniform. And you could arrest your dad if you wanted to here in St. Bernard Parish, but you wouldn't do that, I'm sure. So
better behave.
I will. I promise.
You have to drive the speed limit. It started because a lieutenant in the sheriff's office. And so he wasn't patrolling the streets on the bottom. He was that middle level management guy that was in his 40s. He knew how to look at young deputies in their 20s. And he knew, same words you just used, how to have compassion for what some of these guys experience on the job, whether it's a scene with a terrible accident and a child's been killed, or a very frustrating drug addict that he wants to help. He just doesn't know what resources to give him, because as a deputy, you just don't know sometimes where to turn, what to do. So this lieutenant had met me and had asked me, would you ever consider being a volunteer chaplain? And I said, what does that mean? He said, just come ride, just give your time. And we all know that's a precious commodity. And so it was hard with young kids at the time, but maybe one day every other week, I would just go for a couple hours in the evening till 10 or 11 o'clock at night. When things calm down, you really got a chance to listen and talk to a deputy in their car, which is their office on wheels, and just listen. And I was in a polo shirt and jeans. It was nothing special. I was not equipped for the job. It was one of those things where you just know the phrase God equips. He doesn't always call the equipped. I didn't know what I was doing. I'd never been in a police car before with these guys. Had no interest of being in law enforcement necessarily. But it was a chance just, again, to listen to a hurting person who, and some of these guys might say, I can't go to church. My schedule is terrible. I can't make it, wife and kids or whatever. And so plenty of excuses, but also plenty of opportunities to listen to every topic under this.
And so now you're a full-time chaplain, and you connect with not only about 300 officers in a department, many of whom are far from God, but again, your job gives you a platform for ministry to many hurting people, as you made mention of the accident scene. Or I can remember you telling me over the phone about 2 high school boys playing with a shotgun, and one buddy accidentally shoots and kills his classmate, his friend, and you being called to the scene. And so,
and on that note, it was definitely that day I was frustrated. I had gone to work an extra morning detail I was called to. Who likes to get up early and go to these things? That was basically working overtime. And it was a Sunday afternoon, about 2:00. No one's expecting this. 2 high school boys home alone. And it wasn't that I had a lot to say to them, because the devastation obviously was just unbearable. it was actually difficult to pray with them because they were still in shock well into the evening when everybody cleared out and all the detectives left and whatnot. But a deputy came up to me later and he said, "You have a hard job." And I said, "What do you mean?" And he said, "When I was there, I watched you. I walked up to the dad and I grabbed him by the shoulders and I said, 'Are you?' And I gave his name. I said, 'I'm sorry, your son,' and I gave his name, 'is dead,' in plain language." And it was convicting, or reminded me that sometimes a boldness and a courage to say what needs to be said, but in very tough love, but then in plain language, was all I needed that day. And so to skip around the topic or to be nervous about telling him the truth, there wasn't room for that. There certainly wasn't time for it, and it was certainly no occasion to beat around the bush with him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and undeniably, the Lord is the one guiding your thoughts and empowering you to speak truth in love. Yeah.
100%.
Well, the thread that is being drawn through this conversation with you is the very fact that, on a mission trip long ago that I took to England, whenever I've gone there on a mission trip to London, the underground, the subway always has that computer-generated voice as you're waiting to get onto the train. Mind the gap, and that's that distance between the platform and the train. In other words, in that British vernacular, watch your step. And to me, that will always preach there's a gap between myself and a neighbor, myself and a relative, myself and a friend someplace who's not yet a believer. And what you're telling us today in this challenge to elders on e-evangelism, we got to mind that gap and do all that we can, whether as a congregation or as an individual, to close that gap and to get as close as possible to people who are far from God. Has that been an important part of your ministry philosophy?
Absolutely. And it's, sometimes less about an agenda. It's hard in police work to know what your schedule is going to hold that day. You never know what's going to come across the radio day or night. And so when you shut the door and you start the vehicle, it's a chance to pray and to say, "God, you direct my steps," and the unfortunate circumstances that might call, or the opportunities that the Holy Spirit opens. Maybe I hear a person's comment and it gives me a chance to maybe follow them down the hallway and ask them in private about this or that in their life. It's definitely to listen and to pay attention to others, because you never know what difference you might make just by being present in their life.
Mm-hmm. And just it might take a long time to finally have the opportunity to share the good news verbally with that person. You've shown them act of kindness after act of kindness,
right?
And you earn the privilege of doing that. I've been privileged to go with you to your office, and you've introduced me to a number of people with whom you work, and it's obvious that they can see Jesus in you. And as you, day after day, month after month, year after year, work beside them, that someday you'll be able to have that conversation. That's very plain. And as you say, speaking truth about who this Jesus is to them. If you happen to be watching today or listening to our podcast, and as Aaron has said, maybe you've walked with somebody for a long time, there always comes that moment when we need to close the deal. If I'm a car salesman, I've got to close a deal if I'm going to get a commission check to keep a roof over my head and food on my table. And all of us, we're in sales. As followers of Jesus, we have to know how to close the deal. And if you haven't learned how to do that, just email me, Gary@e2elders.org, Gary@e2elders.org, and I will send you a link to a 20-minute video on how to have that conversation to where we bring a person to a literal decision to follow Christ. It's a 6-circle diagram. It was used with me many years ago in 1978, and I will never forget that conversation on that evening where the deal was closed and I was immersed into Christ. So I want to share that with you. Aaron, can people email you if they have questions?
Yeah, absolutely. My address is ajohnson@sbso.org, St. Bernard Sheriff's Office.
So SB A
Yep.
Johnson. All right, very good. And that address is appearing even now on the screen. And son, I just have to tell you, I'm pretty proud of you. And I brag on you many a time for the great work that you're doing for the glory of Jesus.
I appreciate it. And I guess the main story you said has taken a long time. I never would have thought when a guy asked me if you want to do this or if you want to volunteer, and I didn't even know what the job description was. That was 8 years to the day that I started as a full-time paid chaplain. I never would have thought of the opportunity, and I had to send him a text of gratitude and of courage to encourage him. Who would have thought that his taking a leap of faith would have led to that? And so, anybody to listen to this, being an elder on your own time and giving your evenings or giving your heart and your blood, sweat, and tears to the church, to your local congregation, I want to thank you, because I know now, moving from working for a church now to working for the government, for the sheriff's office, I know what it's like more and more to go give my time to my church now. And I love the people. I love the shepherding the flock in a sense, but I know it's hard. So thank you for watching and sort of trying harder every day to do that.
Absolutely. Yeah. And to that end, we thank again CDF Capital for making this possible. Thank you to all of you who are serving in the local church. And son, I'm sure we'll be in touch.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.